He did not need anyone. He did not need anyone to testify to human nature. Why? He himself understood it well. Happy birthday to this guy. Have you heard of Daniel Goleman, who celebrates his 75th birthday today? Daniel Goleman came up with a concept that's quite frequently used now called EQ, or emotional intelligence. Think about that for a moment. Emotional intelligence. We're not talking about IQ, we're talking about EQ. How smart are you when it comes to your emotions? Are you able to handle your emotions? That's Daniel Goleman, who celebrates 75 years of life today. Without exaggerating, I dare say that Daniel Goleman was one of those people who, as a young Franciscan friar, when I read his book, the light bulb went off because it helped me to understand what I sometimes felt and feel, and what all of us sometimes feel. Those dark emotions that come with life, those dark emotions that none of us choose to feel, they're part of being human. Amen? Amen. It's people like Daniel Goleman who say, getting angry is actually quite human. Daniel Goleman writes, a universal trigger for anger, think about when you get angry, what's happening? A universal trigger for anger is the sense of being endangered. Endangerment can be signaled not by an outright physical threat alone, but also, as is more often the case, by a symbolic threat. Being treated unjustly or rudely, being insulted or demeaned, being frustrated in pursuing an important goal. What happens when those things happen? We have something that clicks in our brain that makes us want to do one of two things. To fight or to go to our room and cool down. The fight or flight response, amen? What I love about today's gospel is that Jesus goes into the temple and he senses an injustice. Something is wrong here. They've taken my Father's house, God's temple, and instead of praying here, they're conducting it like a business, selling ox and sheep and doves and changing money in God's house. Did Jesus just go to his bedroom and shut the door? In today's gospel, Jesus is angry. And it's hard to capture that emotion when we proclaim the gospel, because the gospel writers have made it seem so natural that Jesus just overturned the tables of the money changers and made a whip out of cords and drove them out. Imagine how angry you have to be to make a whip out of cords, and to throw over all the tables, and to yell at people as Jesus yells at them in today's gospel. Yikes! Have you ever been that angry? Today's first reading is about Moses giving the people the law. We refer to them as the Ten Commandments. Have you ever seen the movie The Ten Commandments? What happens when Moses comes down the mountain with these tablets and sees that the people have turned their back on God and created a golden calf? Do you remember that scene? What does he do? He throws the tablets to the ground in anger. Yikes! Sisters and brothers, I suspect that today's readings challenge us to reflect on our own EQ. How it is that we handle our own emotions. In our public schools, we try to teach our kids from an early age what we call social emotional learning. What it is to do when they're feeling upset. What to do when someone says something to you that makes you angry. As adults, I suspect we may not reflect enough on what it is that we do in those situations. How do we respond, and how can we better respond? In today's first reading, Moses gives us the law. And even though Vincent only proclaimed the first 10, how many laws did God give us in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Scriptures? Not just 10 commandments, but 613. Which is why Jesus' new law was so important. Jesus said, of those 613, what are the two most important? I'll tell you what are the two most important laws. What are they? Love God and what? Love others. And if you love God and if you love the person beside you, then you're following the footsteps of Him who died on a cross. But the challenge becomes, how do we keep our human emotions from getting in the way of those relationships with God and with those around us? Sisters and brothers, with 3 weeks of Lent left, let's reflect on how it is that maybe our words and actions in moments of anger, upset, sorrow, distress have maybe harmed our relationship with God and perhaps even more importantly with those around us. Lent is a time for us to recognize how it is that we've turned our back on God and on others. And it's a time for us to turn around again. Do you have the courage? Do I have the courage? Do we have the courage to think about the last person that we hurt with our words or our actions? And to say to them, I'm sorry? Will you forgive me? Will you, will I, will we have the courage to say to those who've harmed us, can we talk about this? I forgive you. Sisters and brothers, Lent is a perfect time for us to reflect on how it is that we've turned our back on God and others. Let's take advantage of these days to consider how it is that perhaps we have done that, and how it is that during this Lenten season we might turn again toward God and those around us.